There are certain moments in life that divide everything into a before and after. For CEO Edward Hayes, that turning point arrived on a stormy Tuesday morning inside a shimmering skyscraper that carried his name. The rain outside mirrored the tension within the boardroom, where billion-dollar negotiations were under scrutiny, yet just beyond those glass doors of the pristine high-rise office, another life was quietly falling apart. Clara Bennett, a reserved janitor who had worked in the building for 3 years without anyone noticing, carried a hidden truth beneath her uniform. Bruises that told a story no one had ever asked to hear. That is, until Edward happened to lift his eyes and truly notice her for the very first time. What followed would create ripples across the entire company, transforming not only policies, but also human hearts. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and standing for what's right, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Kindness Tales Stories, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps us continue telling stories that inspire. Clara Bennett was 26 years old, moving like someone desperate not to be seen. She was always early, always efficient, and rarely spoken to. Most assumed she was shy, perhaps even distant, but the truth was far more devastating. Behind her silence lived fear. Her nights were filled with shouts, slammed doors, and the violent echo of fists against her ribs. Her boyfriend Derek had once been charming. Now he was nothing but a cruel shadow of the man she thought she knew. Clara didn't know how to escape. She had no family, very few friends, and her night shift cleaning job at Hayes Enterprises was her only lifeline. Her body carried the cost of her silence, a fresh bruise across her cheekbone, fingerprints hidden beneath her sleeves, and eyes that avoided mirrors. Edward Hayes, on the other hand, was the complete opposite of invisible. At just 38, he had become one of the city's youngest self-made CEOs, respected for his sharp instincts and relentless drive. Yet success came with sacrifices. Divorced, estranged from his teenage daughter, and surrounded by people who only echoed what he wanted to hear, Edward had built his empire alone. He never noticed the cleaners. He never noticed the assistants. He never noticed anyone below the top floor, until that morning. It began with a spilled cup of coffee in the executive lounge. Edward had returned early from a client meeting and walked in just as Clara was scrubbing away a mess left behind by a careless vice president. She flinched at the sight of him, her hand instinctively covering her cheek. And then, for the briefest moment, their eyes locked. Not the kind of glance that disappears and is forgotten, but one that lingers, holds, and speaks without words. Her eyes were red, not merely from exhaustion, but from something far deeper. He noticed the faint purplish bruise. Bruises never lied. Instantly, memories flooded back, his own daughter's tears after her mother remarried, the times he dismissed her pain as just a phase. Something in Clara's silent suffering struck him hard. He took a step forward, and she instinctively stepped back. He raised his hands gently, trying not to frighten her. The words, "Who did this to you?" burned on his tongue, but they felt too sharp, too soon. So instead he did something completely uncharacteristic. He sat down. Clara froze. No one had ever spoken to her in 3 years as if she mattered. But Edward asked if she wanted water, if she needed to sit, if she was safe. She shook her head each time, though her trembling hands betrayed her. When he quietly repeated, "You don't have to pretend here," something inside her cracked. A single tear slid down her cheek before she ran out of the room. Edward didn't sleep that night. The image of her pain refused to leave him. The next morning he pulled her personnel file, her full name, her emergency contact, and her salary, which was barely enough for rent. He called HR and asked questions he had never once thought to ask. Did they provide domestic abuse support, mental health resources? Were there systems to protect vulnerable employees? No one had answers. So, Edward decided he would become the answer. Clara didn't show up to work for 2 days. On the third, she returned, pale and quieter than before. But something was different. The receptionist greeted her warmly. A care package was waiting in her locker. And later that evening, when she went to the janitor's closet, Edward was sitting there, waiting. This time, he didn't ask questions. He simply handed her a small card with phone numbers, a women's shelter, a legal advisor, a therapist. "If you ever want to talk to someone other than me," he said gently, "they're here for you." Clara stared at the card, her fingers trembling. "Why?" she whispered. Edward's voice broke as he answered, "Because once, someone told my daughter to stay silent, and I've hated myself every day for not listening sooner." That night, Clara made a choice, not to fix everything at once, but to take the first step. She called the shelter, she spoke to a counselor, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel alone. Quietly, Edward paid for her sessions. He approved her transfer to a daytime shift and launched a quiet reform inside his own company, establishing protections for employees, introducing anonymous reporting lines, and mandating empathy training for executives. Whispers spread quickly. The CEO was changing. He no longer brushed past janitors without acknowledgement. He sat with receptionists, baristas, and interns, and when a young staffer was harassed by her manager, it was Edward himself who escorted the man out of the building. The media dismissed it as a PR stunt, but those closest to him saw the truth in his silence, in his eyes, and in the way he truly listened. Clara slowly began to heal. She filed for a restraining order. She moved into a shared apartment with other survivors, and one afternoon, after receiving her GED with the help of company-sponsored classes, she opened her locker to find a letter. It was from Edward. It read, simply, "You are stronger than you know. When you're ready, there's a desk job waiting for you. No pressure, only belief." 3 months later, Clara walked into HR with a smile and hope in her step. She wore a lavender blouse no longer, hiding her arms. Her eyes were clear, her posture strong. From the balcony above, Edward watched her with a feeling he hadn't known in years. Not pride, not relief, but grace. If this story touched your heart, if Clara's courage or Edward's transformation inspired you, please like this video, share it with someone who might need hope, and subscribe to Kindness Tales Stories. Your support keeps these powerful stories alive. Remember, it only takes one act of kindness to change a life. Before you leave, we have a request. Comment below with a single word that represents what this story meant to you. Was it hope, strength, or redemption? We'd love to hear from you.